Welcome to Hoop Talk Fanatics, episode number 21. I am here with Imman, and we are here to talk about Sixers and Raptors series. It's been a tough one for the Sixers this past game 5, and I'm definitely interested to see how they can bounce back in game 6 tomorrow night. So welcome, Imman, and I'm excited to have you on to talk basketball.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what were your thoughts on the last game, game 5?
Game 5. As a Raptor fan, of course, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought we got to see the Raptors play their basketball. And that's just because in those first 2 games, I really looked at that, and not just because the Raptors lost, but the way that the Raptors were playing did not feel very Raptors-esque. What the Raptors do is they get every single board, they box out, they get out and run in transition. They force a lot of turnovers. It's their defense that does it. It's not so much their offense. And in those first 2 games, what we saw was a Raptors team that was shooting pretty nice from outside. They were shooting 40% from deep, which, as we saw in the last game, the Raptors went to shooting 25% from deep in game 5, which is a lot more closer to what you would expect from this Raptors team, especially without Fred VanVleet out there. So in those first 2 games, we saw a Raptors team that actually scored really well in the half court, which is not something that the Raptors do. They only really get out in transition, but we saw a team that wasn't forcing turnovers and wasn't getting out there. Their defensive rating was absolutely horrid. And then you flip it to the last 3 games, I would even say games 3, 4, and 5, and we're seeing a Raptors team that is forcing turnovers, getting out in transition and scoring, and really doing it on the defensive end. And that's the difference. And I think having Fred VanVleet out was a major difference for the Raptors in this case. But game 5 to me felt the most Raptors-esque. They weren't hitting a lot of threes, but they were getting out in transition and they were beating the Sixers with Raptors basketball.
What are your thoughts on tomorrow's game? And do you think that Philadelphia can pull off the win?
I mean, yeah, the Sixers have to just win 1. The Raptors have to win 2 in order to get this series. So already that just bodes well for Philly. And also I think the 2 days rest gives Philadelphia more of an advantage than it does the Toronto Raptors. Embiid has, of course, been dealing with nagging injuries. Everybody on both sides have been dealing with nagging injuries, but Embiid's a guy who needs his rest in order to be really effective. I think James Harden as well, especially as he's getting up older in age. And the Raptors made their adjustment. And we haven't seen the Sixers counter to it. And I think 2 days where you have time to go over tape and you have time to practice and get all of that in, it just gives Doc more time to counter the adjustment, whereas Nick Nurse has to just sort of run with what he's got because it's worked so far. So I think that extra day's rest really does give the Sixers the advantage. I also think no Matisse Thybulle gives the Sixers the advantage considering how he struggled in game 5 there. So I think the Sixers should feel confident. Actually, no, I don't think the Sixers should feel confident. I still think the Raptors should feel confident. I think with the Raptors, I would probably pick the Raptors, although I don't want to jinx anything. I would pick the Raptors only because what we saw, unless James Harden turns on another gear, and I just don't know that I see it from James Harden at this point, I don't know how the Sixers are going to be able to pull this one out in game 6. They might be able to do it in game 7 when they're back at home, but unless we're seeing a different game from James Harden, I don't know. I'm going to pick the Raptors because we saw what works, which is Vision 6-9, which is all the Raptors playing all of their 6-9 guys and the defense that brings. I would feel worried if I were Maxey and I were Harden and I would call for a switch to get off of Pascal Siakam and only be met with OG Anunoby, and call for a switch to get off of OG Anunoby to only be met with Precious Achiuwa. The Raptors can just throw the exact same guy at you a million different times. And I think that that's been a thing that the Sixers have struggled with. And I wonder what their counter is. So I would probably pick the Raptors in that game. I know this is a lot of rambling, but I do think the Sixers benefit from the additional off day and really not having Matisse out there.
So my next question is, do you think it's time to be worried as a Philadelphia fan to see as in going into tomorrow night and having the chance to go back to Philly for Game 7?
Yeah, I think that they definitely should be worried. What we've seen so far is the Raptors outplay the Sixers in 3 out of 5 games. And I think that that's worrying. We've seen the Raptors make their adjustment and we don't know how the Sixers are going to counter. I think that that's worrying. And also, forget this series. Let's say they get out because they just have to win one, and they can do that just off of the brilliance of Joel Embiid. Next series, I don't think they have a chance considering how much they've struggled in the tail end of this one.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, do you think Van Vliet is going to be out fully tomorrow?
I think he'll be out for tomorrow. Fred VanVleet is the Raptors all-star. He is their leader. I think he's so important and integral to what they do. But this is a particular matchup that just gives him trouble considering the size of the Sixers. The Sixers are a very big team. Maxey is bigger than Fred, and he's also faster than Fred. But outside of that, the Raptors like to switch a ton. And the Sixers can find a way just exploiting Fred VanVleet, because if his knee isn't 100%, if his hip isn't 100%, I think he just becomes too much of a liability on the defensive end. He's not quick enough with the injuries that he has, and he's just not big enough to make up for that lack of speed.
So my next question is, what are your thoughts on Doc Rivers? And if the Sixers can't get past Toronto, do you think he will be out next season?
I do think if the Raptors beat the Sixers, they're coming back from 3-0, which is the first team that's ever done that. So I definitely think that Doc Rivers will be out. I think that Doc Rivers will probably be out unless the Sixers make a conference finals run. I think anything short of that, Doc Rivers is going to be on the outs. And he's a player's coach. Everyone says it. And we see the limitations of Doc, especially in these playoff series. He's probably played more game sevens than any other coach. Even on that championship run with the Boston Celtics, they had a lot of game sevens that they had to win in order to get to that point, which is wild considering how ridiculously talented they were compared to the rest of the East at that time. So yeah, I think that Doc will probably be fired, and I think it's rightfully so.
If that goes the direction that you think they will go, who do you think will be coming in as the head coach?
That'd be really interesting. I haven't thought of it. I feel like there's going to be a lot of sort of coaching changes this offseason. We already saw it with Frank Vogel being let go from the Lakers. I think we'll probably be seeing it with Quinn Snyder being let go from the Utah Jazz. So I don't know. I don't know just yet. I think what they're going to want is someone who can revamp what this team does on the offensive end. We should see way more pick and rolls with James Harden and Joel Embiid, and we're not seeing that. So someone who is just a better X's and O's guy than what they have right now with Doc Rivers, and I'm not sure who that person is just yet.
I definitely wish it was Jay Wright.
Oh yeah, isn't he okay? Like the Nova Philly connection. I like that. I'm not mad at
that. So my question is, do you think Tobias Harris is going to have a big effect tomorrow night for the Sixers offense?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's been really good for the Sixers this series. You can look to Maxey for having an up and down series. He's really great in those first 2 games, hasn't been so great in these last 3. You can say the same thing for James Harden. He was really great in game 1, hasn't been the same as the series has gone on. But Tobias Harris has been the one person that I think has been consistently impactful outside of Joel Embiid. And so I expect for that to continue. They're definitely going to need for that to continue if they're able to make it out of game 6. And I don't see any, like they should be favored, right? The Sixers should still be favored to win game 6 or win even game 7. And they're going to need Tobias Harris to do
it. So what is your score prediction for tomorrow night?
I want to say Raptors win. I'd like to see things go to game 7. I'd like to see things continue. I don't want the season to be over. So despite me thinking that the Sixers should be favored, I'm still going to lean on my Raptors and say that they probably pull that one out.
I was actually talking with my college friends about it, and I told them that the Sixers will lose tomorrow night and bounce back game 7 and advance after that game. And I think that tomorrow night you're going to see a lot of Tyrese Maxey. He's going to be like, his authority on the offensive side is going to be tremendous, and I think he's going to be very motivated with Harden, Embiid, Tobias on his side, and I think this Sixers team can really go fast and have the opportunity to get the job done.
Yeah, no, and they're definitely going to need Maxey to really have a big game. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with the length that the Raptors have been able to bother him with a little bit. Great players make beat it. Great players. And also, like, it'll maybe if James Harden can get going, that frees up Maxey quite a bit, because that's what we saw, I think, in the first two games, where when the Raptors sent a lot of attention over to James Harden, that allowed Maxey a lot more space to operate and to work, and he had a really masterful performance. So I think that they're probably going to need some of those other guys, you said it, to go off in order for Maxey to truly shine in this game. But he's been so fun to watch. He's so fast and so athletic, and it's been such a treat to watch him play basketball in this series.
And another thing that I was just thinking about is Danny Green has been off for a couple opportunities from the 3-point line. I'm not sure what his stats were last game, but he definitely needs to step up, as well as Georgie's Niang. I really like Niang and his ability to shoot. He definitely has that type of shooting skill that Seth Curry has. That they got rid of. But I really hope that tomorrow's game is not a disaster of last game. And I mean, it's kind of hard to say that in front of you since you're a Toronto fan, but I just think that it's going to be a difficult situation with this offense that really thrives, especially in the game 6 in Toronto with an amazing crowd as always. And my last question is, if the Sixers don't make it out, what do you think about this series against Miami?
Yeah, so I mean, just the point about games, I hope that it's fun. I hope that it's competitive as well. I hope that it's fun, and I'd like to see. I think with Danny Green, the saying always goes that role players always shoot better at home than they do on the road. But I think Danny kind of benefits from having won a championship with the Raptors. These are not rims that he's unfamiliar with, right? These are not crowds that he's unfamiliar with. So, and he earlier in the season, actually, closer to the end of the season, he had a game where he hit his season high for threes versus the Raptors. It was the game that the Raptors gave him his championship ring. He went out and hit 6 threes against the Raptors, and it was a really phenomenal Danny Green game. Raptors went on to win that one, so hopefully they can still withstand a 3-point barrage from Danny. But what I think the Raptors in the series against the Miami Heat, I think that Miami beats the Raptors or the Sixers, whoever comes out of it. Them getting additional rest, having put away the Atlanta Hawks fairly early, I think bodes well for them. And, Jimmy getting healthy, Kyle getting healthy in order to go at the Sixers and the Raptors. But I think we're seeing the Sixers team even crumble. Even if they won this game in game 6, let's say they win tomorrow, they beat the Raptors in 6. I think that anybody prior to the series starting would have said, yeah, that's good. That's dominant win against a good, scrappy Raptors team. But knowing how it happened, I think most people probably changed their opinions on how that series went. And they saw a team that started to buckle a little bit and started to get chippy a little bit. Joel Embiid is in the media talking about James Harden needs to be more aggressive. Not that dissimilar from last season when he was saying the same thing about Ben Simmons. So we're starting to see a little bit of that chirpiness and the lack of cohesion with the team. So I think that the Miami Heat can beat them. I think the Miami Heat are good enough on the defensive end, and we're seeing them be able to do that on the offensive end. Jimmy Butler was spectacular in that first round against the Atlanta Hawks. And I think the same thing for Miami versus the Toronto Raptors. I think that the Raptors, and the Heat kind of go at each other. They're both very long. They're both very defensive minded, and the Heat just have way more 3-point shooters. They can just get hot on the offensive end in a way that the Raptors can't. I think that the Heat probably beat the Raptors in 6. If I were to predict that series, I think the Raptors can probably take out 2 wins, but I don't know that there's going to be a lot of games like versus the Sixers where the Raptors were able to win by double digits. I just don't see the Raptors really doing that to a team like the Miami Heat.
So who do you think is going to come out of the East?
Boston looks really, really good right now. It's really hard to pick against them, but Milwaukee was my pick prior to the playoffs starting, and I think I'm going to roll with that.
Same. I actually had them against the Suns.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, but the Pelicans look great. I'm really surprised how good they are.
They look really, really good. That CJ pickup was fantastic for them.
Yeah,
and Brandon Ingram is developing into a star right now.
and also Alvarado for the Pelicans.
My gosh, love Jose Alvarado. He's so much fun. He's so great.
Yeah. It's going to be a great game tomorrow night, hopefully. And thank you for jumping on. And
yeah, thank you for having me.
And I'll definitely have you back on maybe next week sometime to
for sure.
To recap the series.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right.